Hey, so I was just watching some videos. I like to watch apologetics videos where people are debating the faith, and some of the videos were debating with Muslims about the Trinity, and it was just interesting. And I had some thoughts I wanted to share. Writing a book, and these things have been running around in my mind a while, and some of these I just haven't got to share yet, and wanted to share a few things. So in ancient Greek understanding, we know that they considered 4 basic elements, all things. There was a 5th that was called the ether, that dealt with things above earth, but things on earth, the Greek ancient understanding was 4 things. And there's a lot of relationships with 4, and I'll get into that some other time. But 4 deals with all time and all space. Well, I'll deal with that later. But 4 elements, and we know about that in the Last Airbender, like in popular things. There's there's wind, water, fire, and earth, right? Like those 4. Well, it's interesting because in Scripture, God is often referred to in 3 of them, quite often. So the Spirit, the word for spirit in the Hebrew is ruach, and in Greek it's pneuma. And those same words, ruach and pneuma, are also used for breath or wind. So spirit, breath, wind they're translated different ways, or that the word ruach or pneuma is translated that way. And so spirit and wind, God is often referred to in the wind. God is also often referred to with water. And Jesus said, if anyone believes in me, he would have streams of water flowing from within him. And he said to the woman at the well, if you believe in me, you will never thirst. I am kind of the spring of living water within you. So water is often referred to with God. And then also fire. So so I mentioned there's water, wind, and fire, and then there's earth. Earth, interestingly, is us. Like, we are made from the earth. From dust you came, from dust you'll return. So the very 4 elements of Greek ancient thinking actually in some way represent God, water, wind, and fire, and us. So it's God and us, the 4. And I'm not even stretching it, because wind and spirit are the same word. Jesus specifically said believing in him is living water, and the fire is very interesting. So fire, fire is, God repeatedly is referenced as fire in the Bible, more than the other ones, more than wind and water. He appears to Moses in the burning bush. It's on fire but not being consumed. He appears in the pillar of fire in the wilderness. He's in the fire, of course, when the Hebrew boys were thrown into the fire in the book of Daniel. The tongues of fire appear on the disciples' heads in the upper room for the tongues of fire. And one of the key ones is, over and over, God says, and the fire was on the mountain when Moses was receiving the 10 Commandments. And God says, I am a consuming fire. Our God, actually, I think our God is a consuming fire. It's in the Old Testament, and it's in the New Testament. Our God is a consuming fire. So it's all over the place. And and interestingly, I think the first use of the word fire in the Bible is Genesis 15, when Abraham is put into a deep sleep, and God appears as a fire pot and a torch, both 2 fires, which is quite interesting. God appears in 2 things, and then walks between the cut animals to cut a covenant with Abraham. And the tradition was you walk between the animals with the other person you're making the covenant with, and you're promising, may it be like me if I break this covenant. May I be like those animals if I break this covenant. But interestingly, Abraham didn't walk through it. God did. But God walked through it as two things. So it's quite interesting. Why did God walk? Anyway, I don't know how to unpack all that yet, but both were God, fire pot and torch. Now here's a really fascinating thing. We have presented the Trinity for years and years and years in all different ways. We try to represent the Trinity. Patrick in Ireland used the clover. There's an egg. God is like the yolk and the white and the shell, and all of them are the egg. All of those are really not so great because you can kind of separate those things. But fire is fantastic. If you research the physics of fire, the chemistry of fire, you'll find out fire is always, 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 always represented as a triangle. Why? Because you always have to have three things in order to have fire. Always. You always have to have fuel, like wood, something that burns. You always have to have wind or air, oxygen, an oxygenator, and you always have to have heat, energy. Fascinatingly, those three things fit perfectly with God. Spirit is wind, is air. I just said that earlier. Ruach, pneuma. It's wind, it's fire. So, I'm sorry, it's wind, it's air. Fuel. Jesus became flesh to dwell among us. God, physical form. Fuel. And then the last is heat, energy. God is light. It says over and over, God is light. And so, or actually in 1 John it says, God is light. He's energy, he's heat. So quite literally, the Trinity, we believe as Christians that God is 3 in 1. Well, that's exactly what fire is. If you take heat out, you cannot have fire. If you take a fuel out, you cannot have fire. If you take wind out, you cannot have fire. Interestingly, in California, the fires took off because there was so much, wind. And when you add spirit to things, God breathes on things and there's more fire. So anyways, there's a lot of beautiful and powerful analogies here. But the physics of fire reveals that you cannot have fire without all three in one. And that is what God revealed himself as. Our God is a consuming fire. So I hope that